Every day, there are people all over the world looking to create better lives for themselves and their families. These are moms or retirees or college students, everyday people. They are Amazon sellers, and these are their stories. Hey guys, on this week's episode of Jungle Scout Seller Stories, I'm joined by Jamie Davidson. He's tuning in from the Atlanta area. Jamie, how's it going today?
Doing great, Greg. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. We're excited to have you here. Before we get started, do you want to tell the audience a little bit more about yourself and who you are?
Sure. Yeah, again, my name is Jamie Davidson. I'm the co-founder of AMZ Insiders. I have two co-founders, Brad Yang and Jason Lee, and the three of us combined to sell a little over $60 million a year on Amazon. Predominantly, most of our focus has always been purely just on focusing on Amazon and e-commerce, but mostly Amazon as our predominant channel for the last 7 years or 8 years, I guess. You know, recently we've worked the past year also with help coaching people and letting people use some of our services from the years of things we've built with our own e-commerce business.
Awesome. So that is a very crazy number for me, and I know for a lot of our listeners. I want to know a lot more about kind of like how you got to that and what a $60 million a year kind of business looks like. But before we get into that, let's rewind to kind of think about like all the way at the beginning. So like, how did you get into Amazon or e-commerce? Where did you start at? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. Yeah. So original background is I was a military officer, gone to West Point. I had a corporate career. Eventually I was like a hired gun by private equity firms to run kind of small to mid-sized education companies as a chief operating officer and CEO. And I moved to Atlanta. I was originally from the Northeast, and my next door neighbor was Jason Lee, who's one of my co-founders. And Jason is native Chinese, and as is Brad. They've been in the U.S. both about 20 years, but all three of us had corporate jobs. So Brad was a senior manager at Coca-Cola. I was doing my things in the education space, and Jason was an IT consultant background for like Microsoft and traveling around to help set up kind of IT backbones for companies. When I came down in 2011, Jason had started selling Amazon a little bit out of his garage at that point. This is kind of prior to FBA. We became good buddies and kind of go over, and our houses were like 15 feet apart. And I'd go over, have a glass of wine or drink a lot. He stayed up late. I like to stay up late. So we'd be just kind of hanging out a lot. But first, when you're hanging out with buddies, you don't always talk like shop and business. And the Amazon thing at first seemed like a little bit almost like if you knew someone selling a little bit on eBay or something, and it just wasn't that big of a deal. It was kind of like a side hustle. In really 2012, after initially the competition wasn't nearly what it was now, of course. But yeah, we got involved with cell phone accessories space at the time and had gotten through some word of mouth of some other people doing it. Got a lot of traction really quick. Basically within a couple years, took off basically like in the second year. Became something very serious quickly for us.
Cool. And you were sourcing these products from China?
Yes. Funny, even at the very, very beginning with Jason too, a native from China, just being able to speak Mandarin. At the very beginning, I thought that was really important. Obviously there's some dynamic. It's helpful to have a dynamic. Now with Jason's actually in China, our team's split between the US and China. Now it is not as important in terms of being able to actually speak Mandarin. That was helpful at the very beginning in terms of our relationships with manufacturers and being able to kind of establish those dynamics. But yeah, everything we did then and everything we still do is 100% sourced through China.
Okay, cool. And you were creating private labels, or back then were you even just selling just generic cases?
Yeah, good question. It was pretty much always private label in that space. I mean, the very, very beginning, like when Jason and I first met, I'd sold a little bit on eBay, but Jason was doing basically retail arbitrage, going out on a couple years before that, basically going out on Black Friday and a little bit of the kind of that side hustle initially to have some familiarity. But then as far as the actual business, we've always been focused on private label.
So I guess it sounded like when you met him, you were still working this full-time job. At what point did you decide like, okay, like I should quit my job or take this full-time? Or tell me a little bit more about the dynamic around that.
Yeah. So for me, it was just a couple of years in, because initially Jason right away, and his dynamic was a little bit different because he was a consultant. So he was billing hours. Kind of one of the funny things is he shares the story was that he actually never quit his job. He just stopped billing hours, and the company they didn't realize till about 11 months in, they were still paying him a salary. And I think they called him up and offered him a severance of $30,000 or something. So busy with the business, he forgot to like actually get his check or something. He forgot to submit his paperwork. But his was a little different dynamic. But for me, a couple years in, I was able to completely do it, kind of able to stagger into it just because we had it off the ground. What I found, and actually all three of us found, because we all kind of have a little bit of an analytical background to it, it's just looking at Amazon. One of the things I tried, all the analytics and the things that Amazon had in place made it easier for us to have confidence to jump over to it. I mean, beyond, in addition to the business, but just the idea that we didn't have to rebuild like a lot of systems and everything.
Back during that time, obviously a much different landscape. How did you go about like choosing which products to sell? You just decided like, okay, I want to go all cell phone accessories. So you're ordering all those types of cases, or did you have an analytical approach to it? Or tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I'm kind of smiling because, it's funny because now that, we're doing some coaching and helping people out, and, we've been leveraging more tools, and Jungle Scout is one of the ones, probably the primary one we do use in ourselves. And we've kind of, some of the things as we're going through coaching, we kind of go back and reintroduce them to our team, or in some cases we haven't used them as much. So, in some ways our business grew so big, but we did not have the tools. The tools didn't exist then for the most part. Even, FBA initially didn't exist. Not nearly the kind of the rigor that we would employ now did we do then. Initially it was a little bit by, word of mouth. We heard some other people selling in this category. I mean, now it's one of the most competitive categories there is in Amazon, and we've been able to kind of just separate ourselves through product development and some other things. But now we're still researching new products now and new categories because we have to continue to grow. And so now we employ those tools, including Jungle Scout and our team both here and over in China. But initially there was not that rigor of it. I mean, one thing we've always done, whether it was then or now, is we've even now where we have a lot more capital, we've always tried to be smart. Like we always test things. So we never go super aggressive in initially. We'll buy like, a certain amount until even if it looks good, then we'll test it. And once it does well, then we'll get aggressive. But back then it was really, it just wasn't the tools and information. So we had a category, and once we got it within that category, we found other things that were related to our product and could see demand. Like, again, our case where there's the iPad came out, we had already had the iPhones and so forth. So we could kind of build around that. And also just find new channels around that product. We actually very rarely ever guessed outside. We don't just guess at a new category. We kind of stayed within our category as long as we could to try to build from there.
So I imagine like a lot of people listening to this right now, they're amazed by what you have done. But for a lot of people, it's probably like really overwhelming. They're probably like, a lot of the people are probably like at the point where, you were just kind of doing this as a side hustle or whatever else. So before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's talk a little bit more about like that phase. At what point did you kind of like have the confidence to, it sounded like with your partner, he had a much better gig because he was kind of flying under the radar. At what point did you like have enough confidence to quit your job to like go after this full time? Or did you replace your income, or you making a bunch more, or you could just see the light at the end of the tunnel? Or tell me more about that.
Yeah, it's basically what I thought I could replace the income was the mindset around. And it was a little bit tricky because, yeah, in my case, I have a wife and I have 3 boys, and I guess in some ways it felt tricky because I was making a pretty good income. I mean, I made close to $500,000 one year in a corporate gig, so that was good. I mean, it wasn't all about the income, and different years the amounts could fluctuate with bonuses. It was interesting, even though I was a CEO of a company at a point, I didn't own the company. Still, there was a board of directors. I was still an employee. And I was just, a well-compensated employee. So even though the income was pretty good and I could continue to do that, or I continue to get offers over the years, it just wasn't, like a lot of people, and even as I've talked to more people, it just wasn't my passion. The same thing, Jason and I had the same discussion. It's just your energy level totally changes. And I'm sure you have the same dynamic. It's when you're building it yourself or with some people, it's just something triggers there where it's not even initially about, exactly how much money you will make or maybe you won't make. As long as you can kind of meet certain needs, then there's like, all right, I just need that so I can unleash the excitement and passion to go after this thing. At the same time, I had to have, with the wife and everything else, you had to have a dynamic that, in our case, it wasn't like, we could take a huge step backwards, and that wasn't really negotiable on her end. So I had to find a way to keep it close enough, and then also just be confident. So, hey, we got a real potential here. So from there, it was fine. So we never had kind of a step back personally, financially, which was great. And then it was a win because then we had more financial freedom and more control over our time. It's not that we work any less. It's just that we could dictate our schedule more. Yeah.
And then did you go all in on Amazon right away, or you were still doing the eBay thing also a little bit, or you had some other channels, or?
It was pretty much all Amazon. Really, some of the other channels kind of came along. We have a dedicated person that we that handles all of our other channels. So like Walmart.com, Staples, we have like 20 other channels, which it adds up now. Their business, I mean, I think it's around $10 million we do in those channels, but it's interesting. I mean, our focus then and now still when we have discussions and think about growing those other channels more, it's still very much all focused on Amazon because we just, we think the potential and the amount of traffic that's there is where we're best at. But, our business has grown and we have kind of obligations through some of these other outlets that we still, we do the best we can. We have our own customer service team and those things. But again, we really think of ourselves as Amazon, an Amazon focus. That's where we put all of our thought, or when we have meetings, for the most part, we're always coming back. How can we stay on top of things at Amazon and kind of continue to reinvent ourselves there too?
So tell me a little bit more about the journey. It sounds like you brought on like kind of 2 partners right away. So there's 3 of you guys. At what point did you start hiring more people, or talk me through kind of like the journey of scaling up a little bit?
In our case, we had a logistics person that we hired pretty quick because, initially it wasn't all fulfilled by Amazon. And, the model was different. Like if we were starting this business today, we probably, it would be longer till we get a warehouse. So we've had a couple warehouses, like a smaller warehouse. Now we're like a 25,000 square foot warehouse, which again, we're still predominantly FBA, but with that in mind, so we had a dedicated logistics person who's still with us today. He's down the hallways. I think we hired him out of a UPS store. He's a guy we'd met and brought him in to help us out. And then we had and again, this is a little bit different because I wanted, in terms of an Amazon business today, we had like an outside sales guy we hired because with our product, we saw there was opportunities to take them to schools and to kind of B2B sales. So, and then even some of the retailers. So we hired, that was the second employee, and he's still with us as well too. And that's the guy I mentioned is kind of dedicated to our other channels. Yeah, those were the 2 initial focuses initially. And then, as we got a warehouse and we have a warehouse team and time, now it kind of looks like a little bit like a traditional company where we have an HR person, accounting, but that's evolved
right.
over several years. Yeah.
Right. And then when did you decide to start hiring a fair amount of people in China? Did you start out with just like a trade agent and then grow from there? Or tell me a little bit about that, or why you decided to do that?
Yeah, it's interesting. The China piece definitely wasn't until later. It's interesting because Jason's been in the U.S. Brad's still in the U.S. So all of us have always kind of lived right here. Jason and I were neighbors. Jason just moved back a year and a half ago, back to Shenzhen, China. We got to the business to we got this 60 million. We really kind of refocused ourselves to kind of grow Amazon to, we're looking to double again. And the China side has really been recent. Like this past summer, we just hired 50 new employees this past year. So we're like really scaling up our team there now. Growing over there too. We did do a joint venture with a factory over there. It does part of our supplies or part of our goods we run through the factory. We still have a lot of our original relationships. But anyways, we basically hired a lot of designers over there. We've shifted some of our marketing team over there. We have a good team over there. We launched in some other countries too. So we launched in Japan this past summer. India, we're just kind of getting off the ground. It's been helpful to have a team over there just because our product, we do rely a lot on design. We have designers. It helps, of course, both from the personnel, but also the cost, less expensive to build the team over there. Right now, we have 2 teams, so we can shift resources back and forth depending what, like the marketing team, we have marketing there and here. Depending who the personnel is, we can shift certain responsibilities back and forth to whoever we think does the best job. Right.
So when you say designers in China, are you talking about product designers or more like marketing type designers?
Yeah, in our case, it's like product designs. Okay. We'll come up with new things for us because it's a very competitive space and we have to differentiate ourselves. Also because the product changes a lot, with new designs and new creations. We're at a point, whereas if we were in the early stages, we wouldn't focus on this quite as much, but that's kind of the way we have to compete and differentiate ourselves at this point.
Looking back and know what you know today, what would you have done differently in the earlier days?
Yeah, that's a good question, man. On one hand, we're fortunate. We were fortunate because, the business, it would be hard to scale it as fast. We have the same mindset. We do think it's an awesome time still to be involved in e-commerce and Amazon, whether someone's starting today or not. So on one hand, we know it's fortunate because the timing was good in terms of being a little bit less competitive, less people knew how to get involved. So that allowed us a better head start. I mean, we've made a lot of mistakes along the way. So at times we have placed some big bets that didn't work out. Now we're, again, even though we have more capital now to make mistakes, from a business standpoint, we were more disciplined with product. We've made some mistakes where we've basically cost us $1 million. Like a couple of years ago, the little scooters, the little 2-wheel scooters. I mean, we went really heavy on those and had $1 million sitting in port when Amazon banned those from selling and stuff like that. So,
right.
but yeah, no. So there's a lot of just inefficiencies we would have had early on and bigger bets. I mean, we've had to navigate Amazon at times. Do have a good relationship with Amazon. It's a very competitive space. So at times, they've kind of, we've been put in the penalty box a time or two if we get too aggressive just with techniques. But so we have to be smart in terms of, our account we never shut down, but as you got bigger and bigger, Amazon would work with us. You just have to make sure you're following all the rules and, whether you're big or small, those are things that are just, we had to learn a little bit early on top of all the compliance things and challenges, but probably products, right. the biggest one, like ordering something, going too aggressive on something before we had a good sense that it was going to be successful.
So do you still stay up at night worrying about Amazon shutting you down, or do you feel like at this scale you have an account manager and that they seem to treat you a little bit better?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, we go visit Amazon a couple times a year, and it's a little bit of both. I mean, on one hand, we do have an account manager. They will give us heads up. We usually can work through things. I do tell people that, that don't have interaction with Amazon that, hey, it's Amazon's fulfilled, or there's a group of really smart people that, want to help. I mean, they're trying to beat Walmart and try to beat their competition. So it's not like they're looking to hurt sellers. And so we don't fear about, being completely shut down. And we tell people, hey, if know what you're doing a little bit up front, we don't think it's a reason not to get into the space at all. We had in Canada, we got shut down in Canada recently because, if our service rates weren't up right or we weren't paying attention to it, we will get shut down. It just takes us some time to talk to them and work through it. And there's a process, but, so again, it's not, we don't live in fear that, we get wiped out. We can get suspended or get an account shut down. And we have a couple accounts because we did a small merger in the early days, and we have some international separate accounts as well too. But yeah, so it's kind of both. I mean, we have to play by the rules and make sure we do our part, some level of risk, but it's not something to think whether you're newer or whether you're more experienced that you have to live in fear of that, but you just have to be aware, try to play by the rules.
Tell me about some of the other kind of rough patches you've hit, or some of the downsides, like in a lot of content like this, everyone just talks about how great it is. But the truth of the matter is, owning businesses and entrepreneurship is hard at times. Do you have any stories that come to mind when I talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the product side, again, our product turns over a lot. So there's, in our cases, if in the accessory space, if there's new phones that come out, which is good because it means there's constantly a demand for new products. But, it ties to what I talked about a little bit. At times we've been aggressive, or if our product didn't fit right, or there's something like an iPad came out in a case, there wasn't a magnetic, or some kind of design change that we didn't realize. So those are things as you're pretty involved in products. And over time, if you're not just going to kind of have a commodity, you got to find a way to differentiate yourself and add value. That side of things, you've got to be careful just because product is expensive if you make a mistake or there's an issue with it. So that's probably cost us a good amount over the years. The biggest thing's probably been either product issues or if we've been suspended for a period of time where it could cost us a lot of money just because of the volumes of sales we were doing. Those are, I mean, as you grow as a team too, I mean, you have to, then it becomes a little bit more of a traditional business in terms of, you have to be good at managing your team and people. We've had some turnover in some parts of our business at time, more like high levels of turnover that we weren't great at that. You got to be able to grow and have a team. If you have a lot of turnover, that can set you back as well too. Big ones have been a little bit, some temporary suspensions, product challenges where it just costs us a lot of money that because either a mistake or bad decision on our part.
You've grown very fast. It's amazing what you've gotten the business to today. But what would you say, so I'm not taking anything away from that, but this is always a fun thought experiment about what is kind of holding you back, or, why haven't you gotten to 100 million this year? Is it because of cash? Is it because of hiring? Is it because of other things? Talk to me a little bit more about that, about still what hurdles you have in scaling.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And, one of the things that's interesting sometimes now that we're doing some coaching and talking to some people, it's interesting. Some people ask us hey, why would you guys even do this? You have enough money, blah, blah. Kind of an interesting question because it's a logical question on one hand, but on the other hand, whether you're a $50 million business, $100 million, if you're a $1 billion business, and I'm sure yourself can relate, you're not hustling less or as you get some level of success. It's not like, you're kicking back and you become less ambitious. At least most of the people I know, people think that sometimes. They think, oh, if I got to, I don't know, whatever pay, if I could do a couple million, then my life would be great. It's
Right.
you're still just as in some cases more, because you're going at it. And one of the mindsets we have, and Brad says this a lot, co-founders, is just because whatever amount we've made so far doesn't guarantee that we'll make a penny tomorrow. Technically, we'll make a little bit of money for X period of time, but especially as you grow bigger, I mean, the competition's fierce in terms of our space. I mean, your question, one of the things is we've been a little bit narrow in terms of our product category because we've been successful at it. As we said, we do, I think it's been a win for us that we so heavily focus on Amazon. We could differentiate a little or diversify a little bit more in terms of our own website and our own email list. And those are capabilities that we have. Things like social, things that are really impactful today and trending that have not been our strengths. We have been fortunate in terms of capital. We haven't taken on a penny of investment from anybody else. It's all been bootstrapped. So we're not limited. We don't have a board. We don't have outside partners. So that's created some flexibility for us. I think, one of the things now is that we're just now I guess about 2 years ago, we really kind of branched into our first new category, but now we're trying to launch into several new categories. It's not as easy and does require more rigor and analytics. And we're employing more of, some of the things where in the past we wouldn't have had to. And also when you're bigger, it's just, it's a lot harder to manage. It's a lot harder to manage certain things. Like let's say your keyword rank for all of our products, for example, we have over 2,000 SKUs. So it's a lot more difficult you have to really systemize things and manage the business differently at that level compared to when you're smaller.
Have you had to utilize or have you utilized any like lines of credit or anything else to help you out with cash flow to scale this business, or it's all just been reinvesting profits?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's been reinvesting profits. I mean, we can get some, with our suppliers, we can get some flexibility around timing. Cash to them is just because we do really large volumes. But beyond that, yeah, we've never taken a penny from Amazon or any of their offers and like that. So again, that's the piece which I would say would be a little bit more challenging in this day and age, is not as realistic, but that's more of a function of that really strong early start back in 2000, I'll call it 12, 13, that helped us kind of get ahead there. But yeah, so on our end, we self-fund everything.
And I'm just curious because that's what holds most people back from scaling, right? It's like once you've launched like 10 products successfully, like how to do it. At that point, it's just like, okay, how do I do this at scale? And typically for people, it's the cash that holds them back. So that's why I was kind of digging at it.
Yeah. And I mean, actually, we have people that come to us that want to partner with us. I'll tell you, we do like a rifle scope business, more of a side. Like someone brings an idea to us, and that's a pretty capital intensive business. We haven't proven it out successful a lot, but that's an example of a place where it takes a lot of capital to go into certain spaces. And whether it's even, an ideal business for Amazon or not, it's a question. Each of these products are different. But, one of the things, even with more newer sellers, we've taught, like if you can develop that level of expertise, you can find buddies or friends, people that maybe do have some capital, even not huge amounts, but, don't know the expertise that maybe they can come in with you and partner as well too. So we've done a couple deals with a couple people, but we try not to do too much just because it can be a distraction to kind of bring people in. Yeah.
With your strategy now, are you still trying to build kind of like cohesive brands, like a line of products that all kind of go together? Or are you more willing to sell whatever sells well on Amazon?
Definitely the first category of things you said. So we, on our end, definitely focus on brands. Again, the brand names are not that important. We don't think, like, our brand names are not that great. And I think that's true on Amazon, or, it's not super critical. We do try to build a brand out, and just within Amazon. And we also sell a lot in the vendor central side as well too. Is a big part of our business. But within our brands, nowadays too, just the more and more Amazon in terms of the enhanced brand content and kind of the feature. I just describe it as a video game. Like over time, as you get to different levels, Amazon unlocks different features for you. We've noticed it even more in terms of brand protection. Amazon's trying to reward people that have brand rights. That's kind of always been our approach, but we also feel like that's, continues to be, I'll say, the way the market's going, but we feel like that's provides you kind of a longer term platform to do it. So we are, some of our smaller, brands are not proven out yet. We have in different categories, but we definitely try to do that and then build products around that, related products in that category.
Give me a little insight into the future. Both, I want to hear your opinion on where you think kind of like Amazon's heading in the future, look into your crystal ball. And then also it's kind of more where your individual business is headed into the future.
It's like you talked about earlier about fears of being shut down or any of that kind of stuff is, you have to stay on the top of Amazon all the time. I mean, every month there's new changes. It's one thing we feel like it's helpful to have a little bit of a team so we can keep an eye on different things and new changes. Because if you're a big seller or small seller, I mean, Amazon will notify you of things and sometimes you don't always pay attention to it. But, it's important to get a sense because there's just so much. Amazon moves so fast. 6 months in Amazon, there's so much changes, right? So if you're someone who can dedicate the time to it, we feel like that's an advantage for you because you can stay up with the changes. The one thing I said to mention, I think the brand thing is important. Our sense is that more and more, things like retail arbitrage and some of those things seem like they're more and more difficult over time, not only because of Amazon, but also because of the major brand owners and different people, that they're trying to get protection, or even whether it's Target, Walmart, that dynamic. In terms of I'll say the marketing, the aspect, we do feel like social proof, some of these things which we don't consider ourselves great at to this point, we feel like we're trying to solve for that more and more, which is, that's a little bit off Amazon, but how do we do a better job in terms of when we're doing our product launches, leverage these different techniques, because some of the techniques we use in the past aren't as applicable to now. So we're looking at things like that. And the e-commerce space, we don't have it completely dialed in yet, but we're working hard and just trying to be aware of what other people are doing and what we think we can do it's not even always to generate direct sales, but even like product launches to give our product away, how we can do that better and fast. Amazon itself, this ties to us is just our product. Like I said, we're trying to get into new categories, grow new categories. And, with that as a business too, the past year, we said the service side, we thought was we looked around at people teaching Amazon. A lot of the people we saw teaching it, the best we could tell, we're like, wow, these guys really aren't that big. And if someone growing to $2 million that's definitely an accomplishment. So not taking anything away from people that got to that point, but we thought, man, we're way past that. Not only new sellers, but over time, we could help potentially people plug into some of the things that helped us get from 10 million to 50 million and some of our logistics that we have in place in China. So that's part of our goal. The service side, I think, is a natural fit for us, but it's, something we're working on. But we envision that will be a nice part of it, but we're still just going really, really hard on the e-commerce side. The other big piece of that is just internationally. We've grown, like in Japan, we've grown really quickly in Japan, like in the last 6 months. Some of these other international markets we feel are real opportunities where we can grow a lot as well.
Awesome. What are your favorite, besides the US, what would you say like your top 3 favorite international markets?
Yeah, I mean, the top 2 that definitely come to mind for us is Germany and Japan are our 2 biggest. We do have a small team in the UK as well too. So we have a partnership with a guy. Essentially it's, Germany and Japan stand out, and then the UK is okay for us, but not exceptional. And then we're going to see, India, we'll see. We had to spend some time getting set up there. And then, we're interested in Australia when Australia launches. I think there's some delays there. And, when we met with Amazon, when we met with them a few months back, they did share that they were trying to work on things to be able to get basically FBA. So if you were an FBA seller for Canada and Mexico for all North America, that it would be pretty much all one. So that was interesting to us too, as opposed to keeping your inventory in Canada or in Mexico, where they could basically within their, they'd basically make it, basically all an autonomous, one big market. So that would be more interesting to us for those. And those markets are kind of small for us. So we serve them, but they're not significant contributors for us.
Can you talk real quick to some of the hurdles about selling in Japan?
Our levels, like we have someone, we'll just say, hey, you're in charge of Japan. Like we basically delegate this stuff, right, at this point. And obviously the logistics and everything else we have to plug into and coordinate. I know some of the things just been logistically is just getting set up in the country. If you have a legal entity that you're doing in some of these countries, that's been the bigger part of this. Obviously the content, you just need to have people that can, update your content in the local language. So it's definitely doable. Of course, you can hire people to do that. So you have to it's the same thing like if someone in China is trying to create a US listing, if they don't know English well, it comes across. You got to just be really careful, what you're doing there. So, right. My belief, I think a lot of it's just the initial setup in the countries, whether it's Japan or India, is just, how you get your entity set up properly. But from there, you can kind of leverage it. You can plug in the same, Amazon side. That's part of the beauty of it is a lot of it's the same. They try to make it similar as selling in the US.
Or someone's listening to this right now. They have $5,000 to get started on Amazon. In 5 or 10 years from now, they want to be where you're at today. What do you recommend for the first 6 months or year for them to focus on to get this business launched and started? How would you do it today?
One thing I think matters a lot, which you reference, is capital, right? So the most people are not going to go at it with a ton of capital. So the framing of your question kind of covers that. With $5,000, it does take some time. Of course, just recognize it's not get rich quick. It's not going to be overnight. So what I would say, if $5,000 is, you got to find an area that's not hyper competitive, I'd say, because you basically want to have some level of success and find something where, both a category using some analytics that you think is not super competitive, but there is traction there. Like, we typically don't recommend going after something where people aren't purchasing it all at Amazon. Like, don't try to guess like a future market, but find something where there's some potential there. We also like to think about, what is something that you think you can add some value to personally, you have some insight to. And so if you can do that, I don't think the goal is that you don't need to come out and crush it, but, get in there and learn how Amazon works, get some success. Because it's funny, it's exciting. Like, when we teach some people and people, have some success, like someone runs out of inventory really quick, they get really excited, like, wow, I didn't really think this was going to work. Yeah, it's very doable if you know what you're doing. You got to follow the right steps. I don't want to say don't set your sights too high, but you can't have like crazy expectations that you're going to make a ton of money right away. Because even when you make the money, initially most time you're going to want to invest it back in the business. Talking about like your own job, you got to really keep that in mind, that as you get into it, it's not like you're going to want to pull that money out, preferably, and pull, for your living, your lifestyles. I would just find like a mid-level competition, or maybe even low to mid, with something where you feel you can get some traction with a niche. And then if you can think about it like multiple products within that niche and the ability to go a little bit deeper, I think that's where you can potentially add value. Just think, again, our perspective is different. I know other people do it a different way, but we don't really have the mindset of go find 30 other products and do the same thing. Ours is to find a little bit, because we do the importance of a brand over time. That does cost some money. It's going to cost you, $700-800 to get your brand registered, and it's going to take 8 months or something. So I would keep those objectives in mind, but you don't want to manage like 10 brands. So just a couple brands and build over. But once you get some success and traction, and you think like the market, then you can go more aggressive. The dynamic is very scalable. It's not your own money. That's where you could partner with some buddies or friends that maybe want to invest, and you give them a cut. That's pretty much how I think about it. And then, at some point you got to take bigger risk and go aggressive, but I'd wait until, you have some level of success.
Cool. All good insights. Can you tell us real quick about what your launch strategy looks like? And I was reminded of this question because you kind of talked about, you don't want to order too many products at once, and with only $5,000. Yeah. I'd be curious to hear a little bit about like how many order units you think you need to order to give a product like a fair shot, and a little bit about your launch strategy.
Yeah, so this is an area we think is definitely extremely important, and it has changed over time. It's like whether you're in a lesser competitive niche or a really, really competitive niche, they're all important. It's kind of like different degrees of really capital. To some extent, capital does get in place. So in our case, we have to spend a good amount of money basically on our launches. Very competitive for us. So the more competitive the space, the more money it's going to take. If you're dealing with $5,000 budget, we typically probably going to need about 2.5 times your investment. Spending $1,000, you made it be about $2,500, $2,500 is just a rough benchmark, or kind of room there that you realize when you're launching a product, you're going to need money for the Amazon advertising and giveaways. Are going to be the two big things. So you need to have some room. Ideally, coming into this, you have some perspective that, hey, this is still a lot cheaper than if you were back in the day, we're going to buy a big franchise, or going to go into where you need 50,000 or 80,000. If you truly only have a little bit of money, you got to just have realistic expectations, because it's just going to take a little bit longer. If you can have 10,000 or 20,000, then of course you can do more. But that being said, I think those first 20 days, we're definitely, depending on how much capital you have, you may give away at least 10 products a day. Realistically, we do give away a lot more than that. Thinking in terms of budget constraints, I would say that you're looking at least 10 a day for a while. If you have more capital, even more aggressively than that.
And for your giveaways, you have an email list, or you use coupon sites or Facebook ads, or what have you found to be the most effective?
We do have an email list. That's one where recently we played around with. We spent a ton of money on Facebook. I told you we have to be careful. These tools you can waste a lot of money to, spend a bunch of money, and we don't always get it exactly right. So we're still dialing in. So you can get, of course, a ton of emails quickly, but you want to make sure that they're going to work. And we've used other tools too. Like we've used some software, basically used some sites to give away products. So we've used that, but that's what we're kind of actively working on now too, is to to find a way to kind of create in-house something that we can really dial in doing on our giveaways. So, certainly it's certainly an important element, the product. It's just changed over time. That wasn't necessarily the same approach we took back in the day, but it's one that we're more focused on now.
Jamie, this has been a really helpful and very inspiring and educational interview. Do you have any kind of last thoughts that you'd like to leave the listeners with?
Yeah, thanks, Greg. It's been great. Yeah, I think, overall, even though, like I said, we've been at it for a while, is that continue to think, e-commerce and Amazon's got a long ways to go. We know it's going to continue to evolve a long way. It's a matter of who's going to be successful with it and who's not. From that perspective, whether you're just starting off, whether you're further into it, I think it's super exciting time to be in it. I'm sure you have plenty of buddies or friends that are outside of the space that are interested in the space. So I think there's just a long ways to go. We still are in the early stages, and so from that perspective, we have a similar mindset. We feel like we've got a long ways. So we're excited about it, and people like yourself that are innovating in the space and the tools, I think it's really interesting and stuff we keep an eye on. And, we're constantly trying to learn and leverage, tools so that we can meet all of our goals too. So that, that's pretty it. We're excited, just like I think everyone else is.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for coming on. It's been amazing. Take care.
Thank you, Greg.